A common notion in the Dragon Ball community is that the Buu saga started off strong and ended strong, but the middle is where it was the weakest. And when we take a look at the beginning of the Buu saga, we can see that the initial movements that started the course of the arc in itself were definitely unique for Dragon Ball, where Goku is dead, but for whatever reason in the plot, he has an opportunity to come back for a day due to fortune teller Baba, and Gohan is going into high school, but he has reasons to participate because of Videl. Mr. Satan is taking credit for everything that Gohan did before. Vegeta has become institutionalized as a father on planet Earth with a wife and child, and even a character like Krillin has had his own developments over the course of this massive 7-year gap. But all in all of the characters once again have a reason to meet each other 7 years later. Now, one of the strengths about the early Buu saga is how it utilized a sense of mystery. Let's start off with Spopovich and Yamu, who are two mysterious warriors that have M on their foreheads, which doesn't have any biblical reference attached to it at all, even though it's pretty obvious that it does. And then when we look at another side of this, we also have two divine entities in Kibito and the Supreme Kai, but at the beginning of the arc, we don't know who these characters were. And when we see Piccolo's standoff against the Supreme Kai, this was further exacerbated as to, well, what in the world is going on? The early arc in the tournament just wanted you to keep watching over and over again just to figure out what was actually happening. Why was Gohan's energy being absorbed? Why was a normal human that got beaten by Mr. Satan years ago able to destroy Videl in a fight? Why does Kibito want Gohan to bring out his energy in front of everybody and completely blow his cover? In addition to this, we also got a glimpse as to how strong Goten and Trunks were as they fought against each other in the junior division, and then eventually fought against Android 18, implying that despite their young age, these two hybrid Saiyans had a lot more potential that we would realize later on when we get deeper into the arc. And as the arc continues, we discover Babidi's spaceship, all of his henchmen that have to be wiped out one by one, and Babidi's obsession with hatching Majin Buu from the magical ball, and the necessity for him to acquire a lot of energy in doing so. And then when you look at Vegeta, he himself had his own arc where he regressed back to the earlier state of Vegeta that we saw in earlier Dragon Ball, turning to the dark side once again as he attains this biblical symbol on his head, and even kills innocent people in order to draw out Goku into fighting him once again. And we got the Saiyan showdown that we were all looking for many years. Now, throughout all of this, Vegeta had full control, and even though he was possessed by Babidi, he technically never really was, because he never listened to Babidi, and his Saiyan pride and free will was so strong that Babidi never had control over him, and Vegeta was completely making all of his own decisions, which is truly a testament to how strong Vegeta's mentality is. The guy is so steadfast and strong-willed that you literally can't even control a character you yourself possessed, even though Vegeta allowed himself to get possessed. Now, let's discuss Fat Buu. Roasting Fat Buu is just too easy. It's like going back to middle school and finding that one kid in class that it's just so easy to pick on him in so many different ways that it's not even worth trying, because it's like, bro, this is such an easy target. I mean, do we want to talk about his dub voice, and even his Japanese voice is weird? Do you want to talk about the fact that he's an overweight, not very intelligent, because I can't say the R word, childish, oddly designed tub of lard? I mean, let's just talk about his clothes, for crying out loud. And let's not forget that his signature ability is to literally turn people into chocolate before all of the other Boos after him did it. Like, really, bro? This is who the main villain of the arc was supposed to be? Now, of course, this ended up not being the case, but if Fat Buu was truly the main vision of the arc, how sad the Buu saga would have turned. And from Fat Buu, we move on to Evil Buu. And to be completely honest, there's really nothing to say about Evil Buu other than the fact that he definitely does have the most intimidating, menacing design out of all of the Buu forms. But other than that, he was in the series for 5 seconds, so like, we can't really have much to say about him, because as soon as he split from Fat Buu, they got into a brief fight, he absorbed Fat Buu and became Super Buu. So he was just a character that was created to create another character, but he himself didn't really have any real essence in the show itself, which eventually led into Super Buu, who is different from Fat Buu design-wise, but doesn't really have a lot of intelligence, doesn't really have any villain ambitions the way we've seen the other previous major villains in Frieza and Cell, and even Vegeta to a lesser degree. And while Super Buu got a lot more intelligent after absorbing Gohan and Piccolo, he really had no substance as a villain. He's basically just like, well, who are you supposed to be in terms of uniqueness? You're like a stronger version of Cell, basically, but we've already seen a villain like you where you're supposed to be this almost perfect entity after absorbing all of these characters into you to get this powerful. And you don't have any ambitions to have a tournament or anything like that. You're just strong just because, and the plot just needs to defeat you. So because of this, there really wasn't much to say about Super Buu, except for the fact that he really likes ice cream and chocolate. But due to the threat of Majin Buu himself, the arc introduced an entirely new concept, which was the concept of fusion. Now, while Fat Buu didn't really have major involvement against fused characters because he only briefly fought against Gotenks, what made Super Buu different from Fat Buu is that Super Buu took the arc into a completely new direction where everything was basically about fusion, because Super Buu himself is literally a fusion, and then he starts absorbing all of the other characters later to become a stronger fused version of himself. And then the other characters, in contrast, with just a small blip of Gohan coming in and unlocking his potential in Ultimate Gohan, only to briefly relive his Gohan glory just to get absorbed later on, we clearly see that the majority of the screen time against Super Buu was involving Gotenks, and later on when we had the character of Vegeta. But unfortunately, Gotenks is a fusion of two kids, and even though they had a lot of power, especially as the Super Saiyan 3 and fought head-to-head against Super Buu, they're still also kids, and because of their immaturity, that brought down the quality of the show, because yeah, it was fun watching them, but when we compare them to the more serious arcs of Dragon Ball, the Buu arc definitely took a step down in that direction. So what's better than a fused Gotenks? A fused version of their fathers, who was strong enough to defeat an even stronger version of Buu, also known as Buuhan, but he wanted to get absorbed to try and help everybody, even though they all got killed anyways because Goku didn't save them and saved Mr. Satan and Dende instead. So none of that was necessary. But fusion was a nice quick detour, and it was a great distraction as to how the arc was continuously dragging itself out. But this was also an early sign that we knew in Dragon Ball that fusion only wins in movies and self-contained stories because the plot will always find a way to force the characters to defuse so that they wouldn't be so overpowered. And after entering Majin Buu's body and ripping out the Fat Buu, we eventually got to Kid Buu. The first thing that Kid Buu decides to do is to destroy the entire planet. Why not? Break the rules. Do what all of the other Dragon Ball villains in the past have just chosen not to do for whatever reason. And while Frieza did destroy the Earth in Resurrection of F, it did get reversed by Whis, so by that very nature, Kid Buu is the first and only villain to actually destroy the Earth in Dragon Ball. Now, technically, Zeno erased an entire universe, so if you want to count that, it would have occurred in the future timeline. And also, the Earth did get blown up in Dragon Ball GT because of the effects of the Dragon Balls. So yes, Kid Buu did what all Dragon Ball villains should have done. Just blow up the Earth. And most importantly, laugh and enjoy yourself while you're doing it. Now, why is Kid Buu the savior of the Buu arc? Because Kid Buu was truly the only form of Majin Buu that really had his own unique identity. Because Fat Buu was a naughty child, and the other Buu forms were just brain-dead monsters. Kid Buu is the complete embodiment of chaos itself. You cannot reason with Kid Buu the way that you could reason with Fat Buu and the way that you could reason with the other Buus to a lesser extent, which made his chaotic nature unique in the Buu saga because there wasn't supposed to be a plot. He's an evil being that just wants to kill you for his own entertainment. And as simple as it was, this made it effective. Toriyama simplified the plot and said, you know what? Let's just end this arc off with a bang by making Goku and Vegeta fight against another form of Majin Buu, and all of the other characters are dead in the story, at least for this particular part. Which, in itself, was the best thing that he could have done, because in doing so, he helped Vegeta go through another character arc where he redeemed himself himself for all of the actions that he took before, even though he technically already tried to redeem himself when he blew himself up to try and defeat Fat Buu. And it also brought the main character of Dragon Ball back, when in fact Goku was a side character for the majority of the Buu arc up until this particular point. But what we also got a chance to see is we saw Goku and Vegeta teaming up, which is something Vegeta was not quite a fan of doing in earlier arcs. But the transition of them having to team up as individuals instead of an overpowered fused character added a lot more complex dynamics to each of the characters, as the whole fate of the universe relies on these two Saiyans. Now, the decision for Goku and Vegeta to crush the Potara earrings and reject the idea of fusing to defeat Kid Buu in itself was better for the plot. Logically, they would have defeated Kid Buu much easier and the universe would have been saved much faster, but story-wise it all worked out. Goku and Vegeta are flawed characters, and the decision to risk the fate of everyone else is something that both Saiyans have had a history of doing. Goku and Vegeta decided to have this fight on their own terms, as Kid Buu was also alone instead of being a composite of all of the other characters. And while they still needed everyone else's help later on, this did set the stage for a much more competitive fight. Now, what's oddly unique about this narrative choice is that the final boss was technically not the most powerful boss, as most storylines follow the traditional rules that the final boss is the strongest. This isn't the case with Kid Buu, and while there is still 4% of the Dragon Ball fan base who are Kid Buu stans who won't accept the overwhelming evidence from the show and manga that he isn't the strongest Buu, coupled with the fact that the showrunner Takao Koyama literally said Buuhan was the strongest, Kid Buu worshippers will still exist despite the fact that him being weaker made the story and climax of the arc better overall. Now, Black and Fish years ago brought up an interesting point about Mr. Satan, where Toriyama was secretly implementing a biblical theme about him. How Satan can manipulate the entire world into believing him, and how you can talk to people through God directly, via King Kai, and no one would believe you, but let good old Satan into the picture and billions will follow. This shows an unfortunate reality about human beings, that it's so easy for humans to believe anything they are told, and people would even believe that a normal human, of course Mr. Satan is a strong fighter on a regular scale, but compared to abnormal threats, he's clearly a normal human, and people would still believe that a guy like this can defeat a creature like Cell and Majin Buu. Keep in mind that the population of Earth has been aware of super powerful entities and the threat that they have posed for years. In fact, we can even say centuries. But despite all of this, they would still believe Satan before acknowledging the counterforce of powerful entities on Earth that fight these villains, even if the answer is staring them in the face. Let's not forget that the Buu arc also ended with the Dragon Team making a wish so that everyone forgot about Buu and the things that happened on Earth. So let's remove the truth from the minds of the sheep so they can keep believing, aka worshipping Satan, while we continue to do our job in peace. Long story short, people love being lied to. And the majority of the fights in the Buu saga, with a few exceptions, were mostly one-sided in a lot of cases. But in the battle against Kid Buu, especially when Goku was fighting against Kid Buu, and to a lesser degree when Fat Buu was fighting against Kid Buu, even though he got wrecked too, and even Vegeta got wrecked, but at least for a while he was holding his own, is that the Kid Buu fights were at least visually more competitive. And you can see throughout the fight that Kid Buu was an innovative fighting genius, where he would figure out ways to manipulate his limbs and attack characters in extremely unconventional ways that we didn't really see the other Buus doing, as they were characters that fought in far more traditional Dragon Ball ways. Now, what also sets Kid Buu apart from other villains is that you can never read him. He would randomly dance in the middle of a heated battle and would also scale himself down to a person like Mr. Satan, adding a playful nature to a chaotic force of nature. And the only time that Kid Buu was really shown giving 100% effort was when he was pushing back the Spirit Bomb, hinting that no one could ever fully gauge his effort or predict his behavior, illustrating that he's the most dangerous Buu. And to close the arc off by requiring a Spirit Bomb to eliminate such a creature, but in doing this it required the assistance of Mr. Satan and also Fat Buu to redeem himself. This ultimately became the entire arc of redemption for all of the characters involved. And for Goku, he got a chance to come back to life and be Goku again, be the main character of Dragon Ball, where somehow, some way, he always figures out a way to defeat the major enemy, even though it was technically Vegeta's idea that defeated Kid Buu. And when looking at the Spirit Bomb, you couldn't have written a better way to defeat a villain, specifically like Kid Buu, who is the pure embodiment of evil. The Spirit Bomb is supposed to be pure energy, and it was the ultimate team effort effort from people far away that worked together into defeating such a monstrosity. While many characters, as we said before, redeemed themselves in the process, as Fat Buu befriended Mr. Satan, and because of how he was valiantly fighting off against Kid Buu, Goku decided to spare his life by telling Vegeta, I'm the boss, I call all the shots, and if I tell you not to kill him, you're not gonna kill him, where Vegeta just obliges and just listens to Goku anyways. And because he didn't have a personality, the arc and the writing itself could focus on the nature of the redemption of the other characters and battles within themselves throughout this arc. And this is a typical theme we've seen in stories. When you have a rage monster-like character that doesn't really have ambitions, that is the opportunity for you to make the other characters have to grow on their own. Now, of course, the story didn't end with the defeat of Kid Buu, because we did have the tournament 10 years later where Goku leaves to go train with Buu. And while the ending of Dragon Ball Z itself has issues that we can discuss in a totally different video in a totally different day, we could at least say that if the story was supposed to end there, that it was a self-contained ending where we weren't supposed to know that much about Oob, and it was more so just setting up that Goku was going to go on an adventure and to train this good reincarnation of an evil villain he defeated. So while the middle of the Buu saga seemed to have a very unclear direction, and at many points definitely dragged out, the final climax against Kid Buu couldn't have been written any better. Now, Jax Blade, the anime fitness YouTuber, once had this conversation saying that if you scratch out all of the Oob stuff of the storyline and just end it with the filler episode called Goku's Always Late, that in itself would have been a great self-contained way to just end the Dragon Ball story. And when you go back and rewatch that episode, it makes perfect sense. You don't really need all that Oob stuff. You could just say Goku and his friends lived another day, and this is the life that Goku had. He came back to life after being dead for all those years, became the hero, and saved the universe with the help of many others, and that's the end of the story. And you don't really need that much more to do. The characters have a celebration, and everything's good. So for all of those reasons, that's why I'll make this argument today, that Kid Buu saved the Buu arc.